Greetings and good Friday morning, this 24th of June, 2022, third decade of the 21st century. I'm going to apologize in advance. This video might be a little bit longer than my usual 20 minutes, uh, just simply because I've been offline for a little bit, for no other reason, simply other than a lack of privacy. My wife as a substitute teacher and my kids as subsequent high school, junior high graduates, middle school graduate, and high school students are on summer vacation. So I have what you would call a lack of privacy. And since I have yet to complete my studio slash workshop, I'm all about privacy. If for no other reason than I get easily distracted. I guess, from my previous line of work, where without fail, as soon as I start trying to make a video, all of a sudden somebody's got to be in or around me. It's crazy. Don't ask me why. So I figured, hopefully in the next month or so, I'll have the studio relatively finished, and that way I'll have more time for privacy. That's basically going to cover my preamble. If you're new to my channel, if it's your first time watching my channel, I started this during the COVID pandemic while I was laid off for many different reasons. One of which was to provide myself a platform to kind of purge my thoughts and opinions. And the second one was my lack of trust in the media. And then the third one was, is it possible that we can overcome our biases? Is it possible we can overcome the bias that the media is selling us and convincing us that we have to take up sides? And can we actually communicate with one another, uh, in a neutral place? We don't have to agree, but can we maintain a sense of decorum? Can we be civil to each other and yet recognize our differences? We all, have our different experiences in life that forge who we are and how we, receive, process, interpret information, and how we deal with it. We are the sum total of our experiences, and not everybody's going to be the same. And if I think I'm a good person, if somebody disagrees with me, why can't they also be a good person as well? Why do we need to be at war with each other? So, with that in mind, um, one particular viewer, Stace Catalan, has taken the time and opportunity to get involved in the conversation. And some things we agree on, some things we don't. So, without further ado, it's been a long time coming, but I owe Stace a response. If you leave a comment, unless you specify otherwise, I like to read and react to your comments online. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So this goes back probably a couple of weeks. Stace Catalan responding to my video pertaining to Uvalde and the Second Amendment. The reason why I didn't go back and respond to the other video about getting out of the way was because of what happened in my state. While I do not use my degree was in education, so school shootings always affect me mentally. Believe it or not, I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. However, there are certain weapons that I do not believe should be covered under the Second Amendment. I grew up hunting with my father and stepfather. I have no issues with handguns, pistols, rifles, or shotguns. I have no issue with the states that have the defending the property laws. I do have issues with the automatic weapons that have been used in the mass shootings. My stepfather, my dad, has been a stout supporter of the NRA and yet also has been butting heads with the NRA recently due to also having issues with modified weapons and automatic weapons. I do not have issue with Matthew McConaughey visiting because he was from Uvalde. I do have issue with Beto interrupting the first press conference, but I understand why he did. His emotions, I believe, got the best of him. I do not believe he interrupted for a political tactic. On a lighter note, I always think of what Eddie Izzard said on the NRA. Guns don't kill people. People kill people, but monkeys do too if they have a gun. So, Stace, and anybody else watching, what I'll say is this: my my interpretation of the Second Amendment is that we should be able to own everything that the United States military owns. Point in fact, you can apply for the licenses. It's a federal firearms license, and they have varying degrees, uh, in which case you have to justify your reason for purchasing whatever it is you're purchasing. Okay, up to and including, we more than likely have laws preventing people from owning a 155 millimeter howitzer cannon, to include the munitions that go along with it. We probably have laws in place that prevent people from owning an M1 Abrams tank, to include the munitions that go along with it. Um, do private gun owners own M2 50 caliber machine guns? Yes. Do they own Mark 19 automatic grenade launchers? Probably not, but possibly. In any case, I do believe that we should be able to own anything and everything the military has access to, for one reason, which is to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government that supersedes the limitations of its power and attempts to turn the military and or law enforcement against its citizens, which we have seen demonstrated in other countries, specifically other countries where the citizens have been disarmed. Secondly, when the founding fathers enacted and created the Constitution, being invaded from outside entities such as foreign countries, etc., was completely and utterly plausible. Now, in the third decade of the 21st century, we don't think of that as a plausible concept, but at the same time, it very well could be. So, part of the Second Amendment was for us to be able to form our militias and defend ourselves. In which case, whether you want to call it evolution or progress, we have formed the National Guard. We have, and we have our active duty armed forces and our reserve forces. But I digress. Um, Many different reasons for that. Uh, Also, I believe in one's interpersonal right to defend themselves and their property against other citizens, because the one thing that has been tested and proven is that people are selfish and people are evil. I know a lot of people that are very anti gun are not in favor of a good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun. That's just an argument they don't like to have, because the flip side is, what they don't understand is, it's not just a matter of possessing a firearm. You have to come to terms with the concept of taking somebody else's life. That is more mental and or psychological or emotional, however you want to wrap your head around it. Um, it's not necessarily just a physical act. Squeezing the trigger is belligerently easy. Pointing a firearm at somebody with the intent to kill, knowing full and well the consequences, that says more about a person's emotional state of mind, as far as whether they have the capacity to do that or not. There's a great book by, I want to say, Rex Grossman. I could be wrong, but it's called On Killing, and I've mentioned it numerous times in several other videos, where it was an army, I want to say an army doctor, who conducted a survey and or a study, combination of the two, post Vietnam, where he discovered that the overwhelming majority of soldiers that shot back specifically misaimed their weapons so as not to hit somebody, because psychologically they could not come to terms with it. As far as the automatic weapons go, the average individual who does not apply for the appropriate FFL cannot own an automatic weapon. Now, I do remember the controversy over over bump stocks. I don't believe, when it comes to Uvalde, that was the issue here. Um, and Stace, I'm not trying to characterize or say anything. I'm just reacting and responding. I don't believe the shooter in Uvalde had automatic weapons. And I think the use of automatic weapons, by and large, has not been the case in certain types of crimes, because more often than not, automatic weapons that have been used in crimes are probably, if not 100%, illegal, illegally owned, illegally sold, etc., due to the ATF and the federal firearms licenses, so on and so forth. However, I think people get confused with semi-automatic weapons and appearances. An AR-15, which shoots a 5.56 by 4.5 or a Remington 223, looks like a weapon of war. It looks menacing. It looks, I don't know, tough, whatever. So purely aesthetically speaking, people look down upon it. Now the Ruger Mini 14 is the exact same platform. It's just got a wooden stock. Usually it has polished steel. It's not matte black. It doesn't look anything like the AR-15 platform. Both of which are semi-automatic, which means both firearms require you to pull the trigger. Now, Stace, I forgive me if I don't know your firearms knowledge, but I also am responding to anybody who may not know as well. Semi-automatic simply means that, unlike a shotgun or a bolt-action rifle, a semi-automatic pistol or rifle will continue to fire every time you pull the trigger. So when you pull the trigger, it has a mechanical mechanism that reloads the next round, and all you have to do is pull the trigger to fire the next round. An automatic weapon, when you pull the trigger, squeeze the trigger, whatever, the weapon will continue to fire until you release the trigger. With an automatic weapon, with a semi-automatic weapon, you have to continually pull the trigger. So with single fire weapons like shotguns, breech loads, bolt action rifles, you have to, like a pump action shotgun, you have to physically reload the next round through the pumping action on the magazine. Or on a bolt action rifle, you have to pull the bolt back, chamber the next round from the internal magazine if it has an internal magazine. And then some of you may be familiar with movies and or television shows, the breech loaded shotgun where they break it open, they pull the shells out, they put the new shells in. Either way, it comes down to how fast an individual can do that, and I don't think automatic weapons were used in these circumstances. I say that because I don't know 100%. That being said, another reason I've taken quite a bit of time to respond is because I needed the time to gather my thoughts, because I always question the motives behind people within the government who want to disarm the citizens. You know, I understand people who've been adversely affected by gun violence. They want to blame the gun. They don't want to blame the individual. They want to blame the gun. And gun violence is the only form of violence and or the only cause of death where we blame the tool. We don't blame the person. We don't blame the circumstances. We we blame the tool. Um, it's the only area where I think we get emotional and we lose our common sense. More people are killed in car accidents than by gun violence. So we look at the cause of the accident, distracted drivers. So we put laws in place to, you know, uh, dissuade or prevent distracted driving, whether it's texting and driving, whatever the case may be. Um, People who die as a result of not wearing their seatbelt, so we have seatbelt laws. People who die as a result of driving under the influence of something. So we have laws in place for that because ultimately the tool is the vehicle, but we don't outlaw the vehicle. Um, and the list could go on and on as far as, prescription drugs, narcotics, etc. But guns is the only tool that gets blamed when it's used for violence. That being said, I came across two things. The first one was Dan Crenshaw, where he said, ultimately, we have a people problem, whether it's psychological, whether it's evil, whether it's a combination of several factors, and it's very, very difficult to litigate, or more importantly, to legislate. It's very difficult to try to enact laws to prevent human behavior. And we've tried. We already have laws on the books that have outlawed outright murder. Okay, like if you physically take somebody's life, you'll more than likely be arrested and you'll go to trial and you'll have to plead your case whether it was justified, unjustified, etc. But in this country, there's a better than average chance if you kill somebody, you're going to be arrested first, and then you'll have to wait to be proven innocent. Even though our law says innocent until proven guilty, let's face facts. You can be detained, all right, and you can be held while a preliminary investigation is done. And if your state doesn't have laws to protect you from protecting yourself, if you don't have stand your ground laws, if you don't have castle laws, if your state doesn't have laws in place to protect you from protecting yourself, that's dangerous. That basically protects criminals. So somebody threatens you and your life or your loved ones or whatever the case may be, and you defend yourself, you're now at greater risk of being punished than the criminal breaking the law, because in certain states we have certain states that are enacting laws to favor criminals for reasons I don't know, other than trying to curry favor with votes or voters, or I have no idea. I mean, to me, there are certain things that are just black and white. You do something, it's considered against the law, you're a criminal. All right, it can be argued in a court of law, mitigating circumstances, but anyways, um so trying to litigate the potential for behavior is dangerous. Then you have the red flag laws, which has been spoken about at least by myself more than once, and I think the Senate recently just passed some legislation. That's a dangerous slope. All right, because what are the checks and balances? All right, what's to prevent somebody from false flagging somebody? And I think those are valid questions. What sort of checks and balances do we have in place? Because you can only imagine how this will go. You know, couple of people, cry wolf, and it's a wolf. Yay, the law's working. Then somebody comes along and cries wolf, and it's a false flag. Somebody breaks up with a significant other. The significant other is upset. So then they false flag the other person. It's discovered. It receives a tremendous amount of press coverage, media coverage, and then all of a sudden we're back to, questioning every potential call. So, and that goes back to things I've said in the past. I know people can get overly sensitive to language, but to quote Robert Downey Jr. from Tropic Thunder, never go full retard. We do not make appropriate course corrections in this country. We make excessive corrections. Anybody who's ever driven in the rain or driven in the snow, when your vehicle loses traction, there's a right way to handle it and a wrong way. Well, in America, by and large, we always handle it the wrong way. We slam on the brakes, all right? We steer into the skid. Um, we always excessively overreact. So I'm very, very hesitant and cautious with these false flag laws or with these red flag laws. But at the same time, I also get it. Okay. I also understand that, hey, there are certain people that should be nowhere near anything that can be used as a weapon to harm somebody. A baseball bat, a kitchen utensil, a vehicle, whatever. But that opens the door to another entirely different conversation. So it starts with the red flag law, and trust me when I say the dominoes that will eventually fall are many, as far as who has the right to determine psychological viability, so on and so forth, the potential for false flagging. So it goes back to what Dan Crenshaw said. It's almost impossible to legislate someone's behavior, because somebody could be flying under the radar, presenting zero signs and zero symptoms. They commit an evil, atrocious act, and then only with the benefit of hindsight, you'll find people saying one of two things: "We never could have seen this," or "Yeah, yeah, I think looking back on it, I saw some indications." So it's just, it's a horrifically dangerous precipice to be on, and I don't know. I feel like I'll just spiral if I keep going on it. Second thing I came across was an interview uh, by I can't he goes by Patrick something. I'm not overly familiar with him yet, but he was interviewing Taya Kyle, Chris Kyle's widow, and the short version is this. Now they talked about a great many things, up to and including uh, basically the killing of Chris Kyle and his buddy by, of all things, a former Marine. Apparently, there were a lot of signs, symptoms, and indications that there was something wrong with this kid. Taya believes his mother had foresight; she was aware, and Taya believes that her mom is that the kid's mom is culpable, but it was not done with malicious intent. But that the mom was aware that he had issues and did not alert Chris and his buddy of the issues. So if basically, according to Taya, I'm sorry, the mom knew that he had problems, asked Chris if he could help him, but didn't disclose to Chris, hey, uh, maybe avoid things like shooting. Um, and then last but not least, she said that in her opinion, going all the way back to Columbine, when you look at the amount of media coverage, the column, I used to know their names by heart, but it's like Derek something and Klebold. Um, when you look at the amount of media coverage, the amount of press, the amount of fame, good or bad, that the shooters received, in her estimation, the reason for a lot of these mass shootings, a lot of these school shootings, is a combination of emotional, psychological issues and the attention. Because no matter what, the shooter is going to get attention. And she said, the moment we stop celebrating in any way, shape, or form, the moment we stop giving so much attention to these evil acts, she thinks the less you'll see of it. If it wasn't for the attention, the overwhelming majority of these people wouldn't do what they're doing. Um, and I looked into it a little bit as well. Going back to the mid to late 1800s, shootings at schools is not new. What has changed in the lexicon is, with rare exception to the Watchtower shooter in Texas, um, is the overwhelming majority of school shootings, uh, at least over the span of about 100 years from like the 1880s to the 1980s, usually involved one-on-one. An individual student had an altercation with an individual student. An individual student had an altercation with a teacher. A teacher had an altercation with a student. A teacher had an altercation with another staff member, or a staff member had another altercation with a staff member. So they were very isolated, and they were very singular, one-on-one. It wasn't like the mass shootings we have of today. So uh, yeah, in Taya's estimation, if we stop giving it as much attention, then perhaps, people won't resort to that. But the problem is, you take away from one, it'll go somewhere else. These people will find another way. You take away the gun, I question whether or not these people will find another way. And to Taya's point, all it takes is one. So you take away guns, which I think is dangerous. I think that's a dangerous concept, but let's just play that. Let's just play with the cards we're dealt. You take away the guns. All it takes is for one person to get a bright idea and to execute that bright idea, and then that idea sinks its claws into society, and then how many others? Because you don't hear about these mass shootings up until Columbine. Prior to that, in the 60s, you had, I can't remember if it was Dallas. I used to know this, but the clock tower shooter in Texas. Prior to that, um, there's not much until you get to Columbine. And the amount of attention Columbine got in the wake of Columbine, we've had more and more and more of these events. So if you take away the tool, I venture a guess that a rather ingenious person who's emotionally reached the culmination point of this is what needs to happen, they'll find another tool. And then once they receive a lot of attention in the media, you'll see a lot of copycats. That's about all I have to say on that. If you want to comment and have more conversation on that, by all means, leave a comment, and I promise to read and react and respond to it. But we are not done. We are changing directions, putting my turn signal on. So Stace also responded. The only changes from the HBO Max / DC Universe merge was that the DC Universe streaming services also had access to comics to where you could read the comics online. I watched Arrow, but really couldn't get into much of the other DC shows, even Gotham. I watched Constantine when it was on NBC and was sorely disappointed when it was canceled. I was thankful to see Matt Ryan return via the Arrowverse. It took me a bit to get into The Expanse, and then I didn't really watch it. However, I can always attempt to watch it again, as I do enjoy a lot of the cast for all their other works. Admittedly, so Stace, I was not into Arrow at first. My wife was. It started. So Smallville ended May of 2011, and then the following fall in 2012, Arrow started up. Because they did not reuse Justin Hartley from Smallville, I was a bit jaded, and I was less than interested in Arrow. Um, but last year, prior to going to GalaxyCon, when Stephen Amell said he was going to be there, um, we binge watched Arrow, and I liked it. If I'm not mistaken, season 8 was phoned in simply so that they could tell the Crisis on Infinite Earth multiverse story. And I want to say season 7 was kind of meh, but the first 6 seasons were pretty decent. Um, that whole Arrowverse thing with Greg Berlanti, I originally got into it because of The Flash, and The Flash was pretty good in the beginning. Um, I think it's gotten a bit melodramatic lately with the whole turning around, you know, the little monologues, like, we're having a face-to-face conversation, and then, you know, I, that melodrama, I think, is a bit overdone. I really was into Legends of Tomorrow, and then it was not so much the wokeness with like Sarah Lance, being lesbian and all that. The plot and the storyline got really, really corny. And then when they kind of violently flipped the script with the whole uh, time travel changing things up, and Bayrat was now alive instead of dead, I feel like from right around that time, if not a little, the season prior, it just got really, really corny, almost like it was made for Nickelodeon and not the CW. Um, but that's just my 2 cents. Never got into Supergirl, not for any reason other than I just didn't get into it. Stargirl, I think you mentioned, is on HBO Max. I don't think it's on the CW. I do like Tyler Hoechlin from Teen Wolf because I'm a big, big fan of werewolves, and Bitsie Tulloch from Grimm. but admittedly, I have not gotten into Lois and Clark, which my understanding is a spin-off from Supergirl. Um, so I'm not really sure what to say other than, we'll see. It's been my estimation that the CW has been trying really, really hard to address um, trending socio-political issues of, I guess, what might be classified as people who are considered to be marginalized. Um, and I understand that there's a population that might satisfy. I think by and large, the viewing audience is voting with their dollars, so to speak. They're just not tuning in. I think by excessively trying to reach that small niche market, what's being discovered is that it really is a small yet niche population, and I think it's backfiring. I mean that in no way, shape, or form disrespectful towards the market they're trying to serve. I just think, as far as what's necessary to keep a show on the air, what's necessary as far as viewership and so on to keep something going, I think the CW tried really hard to reach a certain group of people, and they're not getting the numbers they need in order to justify the expense, so to speak. I hope I'm saying that right. I hope I'm trying to be as neutral as I can be. Because for me, at least, I'll say this: no matter where you turn, I feel like I'm having it shoved down my throat. Um, and I equally understand after talking to my therapist how, if I'm what's considered heteronormative, how people who are not heteronormative have felt marginalized for years by having heteronormative content shoved down their throat. So like now it's their turn. So as a heteronormative person, having non-heteronormative content shoved down my throat. So when I tune in for my stories, I'm trying to tune out. So when I'm tuning in and my stories are also tuned in, yeah, it's not where I want to be. So that's why my wife and I have been searching for content that is not trying to address modern day trending issues. Stace, I have no idea how you feel about it. In which case, The Expanse um, doesn't address that stuff. The Expanse takes place in the future where, you know, homosexuality, lesbianism is a bisexuality, all there. Okay, but it's done in my opinion, it's done tastefully. It's not like just it's not excessive. I think it's done tastefully. It fits the story. uh I get a lot of hints of Firefly and some hints of Star Wars. I don't know if you'll feel the same way by rewatching it. uh Even if people borrow and steal from other plots and stories to tell their own version of a story, I liked it. I dug it. The whole United Nations for Earth, the Mars Constitutional Republic, the Outer Planets Alliance, the Free Navy. I thought that was super cool. The proto molecule. I thought all of that was cool. Um, I don't have HBO Max, so we'll see if that's something in our budget that we can get around to. Um, but I think that says about enough. I've talked on and on for over 30 minutes now. So, Stace, I look forward to hearing from you. I apologize for taking such a long hiatus. And anybody else, the way that I like to operate is, I don't care if you like, I don't care if you subscribe, I don't care if you share, I don't care if you hit the notification bell. I just like comments. I just like people getting involved in the conversation, demonstrating that whether we agree or disagree, or more importantly, if it's something that we can nerd out about, I'm all for it. So, Stace, I'm going to pose a challenge to you. We can do two different things. We can continue the discussion about the Second Amendment and all of that stuff. And then my next challenge is I'd like you to pick out something that we can nerd out about. That's something we can dork out about, even if I'm not familiar with it. Um, if you want to nerd out about vampires versus werewolves versus shapeshifters, or if you're a fan of supernatural or whatever the case may be, uh, I put the challenge on you to come up with something and uh, give it a little something to it, though. All right, don't just put it on the menu. Deliver the meal. All right, give me a little bit of garnish. Give me some meat and potatoes. I'm going to put the challenge on you to create something for us to nerd out about. And for anybody else who wants to get involved, uh, just leave a comment, and I promise I will read, react, and respond. And if you do, you're awesome. Enjoy your Friday. Remember, everyone deployed.